I just think they're the safest players with just as much upside as anybody. We've seen what Jefferson has been. We know what Chase has been on a per game basis last year, and even the early part of his career. They're tied to strong systems and quarterbacks that will certainly get them the ball enough and make them successful enough. Jefferson benefited with the addition of Kevin O'Connell. You saw what Joe Burrow has become to help Jamar Chase. And so I think when you're talking about what their abilities are, where they are in their careers in terms of age, which gives them the edge over Cup. To me, it's a no-brainer. Heath is probably a better person to ask why he has Chase over Jefferson. I know we've talked about that quite a bit. He goes back to his points per game and the potential of what Jordan Addison could become to maybe detract from some of what Justin Jefferson does. But to me, Jefferson's the easy number one choice, and Jamar Chase the easy number two.
What do you think about that, Dan? Because Eckler's been a stud 2 years in a row, and he averaged more points per game than both of them, I believe. Yeah, he did. He averaged 22.3 points per game, and Justin Jefferson averaged 21.5 points per game. Cup, like I said, was better than that. Cup was at 22.6 points per game, but again, with Stafford, it was closer to 25 points per game. Yeah, I mean, is that it? Is it just age? Because these running backs are getting older. We were saying the same thing about Eckler last year, and he was amazing.
He's now reaching a different stage of that age bracket, though. I think he's going to be 27 this year.
28.
28 this year. Sorry, it's going into 27 last year. So higher chance. I also feel like there's a possibility that offense takes totally different shape this year and is better in the red zone through the air with Kellen Moore calling the plays and Quentin Johnson now in the mix. So I think you could see a change there. For me, those factors are enough to boost the other two players. I do have Jefferson and Chase one. I mean, some of these stats for these two players, Jefferson and Chase, really stand out to me. Jefferson has more PPR points in his first 3 years as an NFL player than any wide receiver in history. And he did that despite only having the 25th most touchdowns over that period. So if there is any possibility for some touchdown regression here with Jefferson, I mean, we're talking about someone who's going to set the record at some point for fantasy. I mean, he had 4 finishes wide receiver 1 last year, 2 as the wide receiver 2 overall. Again, not with a lot of touchdowns last year. There are some issues I have with Jefferson. The only thing is 4 games with 6 targets or fewer. In all those games, including one I watched against the Giants, he actually had 7 in that one. The one I watched against the Giants, they just used bracket coverage against him the whole time. But that may not be possible this year. If Jordan Addison plays as well as some people expect him to, that's going to change how defenses can defend Jefferson. So that's another tip in his cap. Then for Chase, the case for Chase, I mean, over Jefferson would just be the red zone role. I think he had 28 red zone targets last year. That was the most in the NFL. 22 touchdowns over his first 2 seasons. That was the most by any receiver in his first 2 years since Beckham, who was amazing during those years. And out of those 28 red zone targets last year, actually over the past 2 years, 27 targets in the end zone alone. So if you look at Chase and say, well, no one can really match up against him man coverage one-on-one. Teams have tried to, so they've abandoned that, or they've tried to shift coverage over there, but they've abandoned that because then it leaves T. Higgins open. There's a good chance that he's going to be able to kind of repeat what he's been doing as far as touchdowns this season. So he also had 5 top 5 wide receiver finishes I just looked at. And so if you get a bigger role in the red zone here, that for me is the case over Jefferson, I would say. Just the possibility of more touchdowns and the possibility of there's no real way to defend him versus, we have T. Higgins as a realized great receiver. Jordan Addison, more of a projection, especially in year 1. But both of those guys I would have over any running back.
All right, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Sorry in advance. I know I'm ruining the number 1 pick for everyone, but Justin Jefferson is bust proof. I mean, I really cannot, I just cannot think of what could go wrong other than injury. Chase, on the other hand, do you feel that way? Because I think if you take a guy 2nd overall and he performs like a 2nd rounder, let's say, like wide receiver 5 or 6, I would consider that a bust. I know a lot of people would take issue with that and be like, "You're only a bust."
But how would he finish that far down?
Well,
what would be the case?
Well, he was wide receiver 4 per game in non-PPR, number 3 per game in full PPR. Higgins is the case. I think when you look at, I've said this before, when you look at the very best receivers in fantasy, especially particularly the ones that finish number 1, they are usually total target hogs, clearly better than every other receiver on their team. They usually don't have a T. Higgins on their team. So that would be something that holds down his ceiling a little bit. And I think you look at Jamar Chase's, I mean, I don't really care about this. Like, I love Chase, but his 17-game pace was 1,482 yards. Justin Jefferson was over 1,800 yards.
Right.
Like, it wasn't even close. So I don't know. Jamie, how do you feel
They're
about this?
different players? And oh yeah, go ahead, Jamie.
Well, yeah. Go ahead, Jamie. Yeah.
I mean, in terms of Jefferson being bust proof, I think, if you're drafting a number one, you're thinking that's as close to possible as any player, because why else would you do that knowing the talent? But we saw what happened to Kupp last year when Stafford got hurt. What would happen to Jefferson if Kirk Cousins goes down? Is there enough trust in the quarterback situation there in Minnesota to say that he's still going to be that type of player? I know we kind of crap on Kirk Cousins a lot throughout his career, but he's still been very good for a lot of his fantasy receivers, from Stephon Diggs to Adam Thielen to now Jefferson. So there's one scenario, and then the other one would be is why I think Heath is a little bit concerned is Jordan Addison really that good? To where he's going to take away some semblance of production to the point where it's that much better than what Adam Thielen was doing. So. I think there's two scenarios there that can maybe knock him down a few pegs, aside from him getting hurt. So, I don't think you ever want to put that necessarily that moniker on somebody that he's
I know
it's
it's scary. I get it. And, like, anybody's quarterback could get hurt. I mean, if you look at what Tyreek Hill did with Skylar Thompson last year, he was absolutely terrible. He was really good with Teddy Bridgewater, but anyone's quarterback could get hurt. Any player could get hurt. But if there are no injuries, Jefferson feels super safe. Chase is great.